Bleeding in different sections of the body are different treatments. So everything, it doesn't matter where it comes from, bleeding that starts in the arms or legs starts with direct pressure and then a tourniquet application. We'll put a tourniquet on, okay? If it's bleeding from junctional areas, like your neck, your armpits, and your groin, okay? Neck, armpits, and groin. Places that we can't put a tourniquet. What we're gonna do is start with direct pressure, and then we use a wound packing technique, okay? And then we have other areas of the body, okay? From the diaphragm, from the center of your chest, up, front and back, we use a waterproof seal, okay? From the center of your chest down to your waistline, we use a pressure and a pressure dressing, okay? I'm gonna go through these steps one by one. So the first thing we start in every treatment is pressure. When somebody has a life-threatening bleed, the first thing we do is put pressure on it, okay? And the way, what it looks like is very simple. If this is the injury, okay, that's a big open injury on, say, somebody's leg, literally press and hold, okay? We're gonna push and hold on it, okay? If you have something to put in between you and the patient first, that's great. It's not 100% necessary, but if you have a piece of gauze or anything to put in between them, that's great. Put it on top of the wound, press and hold, okay? Now, direct pressure will stop 99% of most bleeds all by itself, okay? But it takes a long time. I have to hold pressure for 10 to 15 minutes to get it to stop bleeding, okay? If I'm holding it for, say, 8 minutes and I lift up to check it and blood shoots out of the wound and I go back to pressure, that means I got to restart the clock and I got to hold it for another 10 or 15 minutes. So it's really important to press and hold and don't lift up to look at it, okay? What's interesting though is if we have a tourniquet, let's say this is somebody's leg that was bleeding like that. I'm gonna come over, I'm gonna press and hold. I'm gonna ask somebody, get me a tourniquet. They come over with a tourniquet, okay, commercial tourniquet. If I let go of this, I can put the tourniquet on and stop the bleeding for good using this device. Now I don't have to hold it, okay? So the goal is to hold pressure and not look at it until somebody brings you another device to stop the bleeding, okay?
باختصار هذا الشيء اللي قال كنعتبروه هذا بحال الرجل. إلا كان شي جرح بالغ يعني كيخرج بزاف ديال الدم، قال لك غتبرك عليه باش توقف الدم باش ما يكونش النزيف الحاد. وإلا عندك الخيط من الأحسن حزموه بالخيط، وحتى إلا طلقتيه ماشي مشكل. إلا ما كانش الخيط خاصك تدير البريشر وتخلي الدم ما يخرجش بزاف على ما تجي الإسعاف.
All right, I'm going to show you a little video again what it looks like. First you identify the wound, find it, and then we're going to take something and put it over the top if you have it. But notice how she's not using the entire shirt to put over the wound. The reason why she's not using the entire shirt is because if you're missing the spot, you press down and you're missing that spot, you're not going to know it. The shirt is going to act like a sponge. It's going to absorb the blood, and by the time you realize that's getting soaked with blood, it's too late. The person's going to have bled out. So we use just enough to cover the wound, no more. All right. Now, if you have a wound in one of those junctional areas, your neck, your armpit, your groin, okay, we use what we call a wound packing technique. Okay, preferably with something that we call a hemostatic agent. First, I want to show you how we pack a wound. If this is your injury, okay, and it's in one of those junctional areas somewhere I can't put a tourniquet, we're going to identify where the wound is, put pressure on it. Somebody's going to hand me the gauze pad, strips of your t-shirt, whatever fabric you have to put in the wound. We're going to wrap it around our finger, make a wad of it, press it to the bottom of the wound, and then continue to fill it as quickly as we can. Fill the entire area. Okay, get it in all the nooks and crannies of that wound. Get as much in there as we can. Once you fill the entire area and can't get any more, put whatever's left over on top, press and hold. Okay, and again, we're going to hold pressure for 10 to 15 minutes without looking at it. Okay, at the end of 15 minutes, lift your hand up. If it's not bleeding, then we're going to use a pressure dressing or some kind of bandage and secure it. Okay, if you lift your hand up and it is still bleeding, back to pressure and hold it. Keep that blood in the body. Okay, now you can see I've got a lot of material in that wound. This is what we have to do to
الطريقة دابا
protect something.
الطريقة دابا اللي وراكم دابا قال لك إلا كاين الجرح في بلاصة ما يمكنش نديرو لها الخيط مثلا في الكرش ولا في الظهر مثلا قال لك ما يعني الطريقة اللي ورا دابا كتحاول ما أمكن تدخل يعني هاد التيشو هذا تدخلو من بعد داك الشيء اللي بقى غتدير به يعني الضغط غتدير على الدم الضغط باش ما يخرجش صافي.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about gunshot wounds and how gunshot wounds happen, what we look for. I want you to see, this is my little simulator, right? That's a gunshot wound. Are both of these cameras on?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a gunshot wound, right? There's a gunshot wound. They both look very different, okay? The inside of the body is very similar. Doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside, the inside is similar. It's not the size of the bullet that does the damage, it's the speed of the bullet. The faster the bullet's traveling, the more damage it does under the surface of the skin, right? You get whatever kind of hole on the surface of the skin. When the bullet goes through that skin, it slows down in such a rapid fashion, it causes a blast wave. If you picture a boat driving across the water, you get that wake behind it, that's what happens under the surface of the skin, okay? So now when we have an injury in an arm or a leg, okay, and we see that hole, we don't have a tourniquet, this would be first, okay, but if we don't have one of those, we could also pack the wound. Or if it's in one of those junctional areas, okay, we're gonna pack the wound. We're gonna take our fabric, whatever it is we have, wrap it around our finger, push it to the bottom of the wound, feel for that warm pulsating blood on our finger, and then we're going to aim for that spot and fill that area up. You can alternate fingers if you'd like. It doesn't really matter as long as you get it in the wound as quickly as you can. Fill that entire void, take what's left over, and apply direct pressure and hold it, okay? Now, if you're using strips of your t-shirt or a regular gauze pad, we hold it for 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, but they make something a product that's called a hemostatic agent. Okay, a hemostatic agent. It looks like this. Okay, it's just regular gauze pad. You'd never know it had anything in it. It's just regular gauze. It looks just like any other gauze pad, but it's impregnated with something called kaolin. It's like a natural clay. And what that does is it pulls the moisture out of the blood and promotes clotting, okay? So quick clot combat gauze or quick clot rolled gauze. There's a bunch of different versions of it. The product that's in the gauze is the same, okay? Again, same technique, getting it in, wrap it around your finger, press it to the bottom of the wound, fill that void, get as much in there as you can, as quickly as you can. Once you fill the void, apply direct pressure and hold it. Now, if you're using quick clot, you only have to hold it for 3 minutes. Okay, you hold it for 3 minutes. At the end of 3 minutes, if it's not bleeding, wrap it up. Okay, at the end of 3 minutes, if it is still bleeding, go back to pressure and hold it for an additional 15. This works very well. This stuff works good, okay? It's what it's for.
هاد الباندا هذا اللي وراكم دابا I don't want to touch it.
Okay. Yeah, there's nothing on it. You don't feel it.
اوكي.
It's dry.
هاد البنده قال لكم دابا هذه سبيسيال ديال الجروح البالغه بزاف، يعني هي فيها واحد الماده كتخلي الدم يمتص منه الماء، باش يعني ملي الدم كيولي خاتر كيتسد الجرح، كيساعد باش يتسد الجرح. هذا هو الدور ديال هاد البنده.
All right, no worries. All right, so again, now where do we use that? We use that on those junctional areas. It's designed for right here, your groin, your armpits, and your neck. Those spots in your body where major arteries run very close to the surface of the skin and you can bleed out from very quickly. Well, while we're on that topic, how long does it take to bleed to death from one of these injuries? If you're hitting the neck or the armpit or the groin, you can die in as little as 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. You don't have a lot of time to take care of that injury. So let's say you're the one that's injured. Okay, you fall through a piece of glass and cut your brachial artery. Okay, something stupid happens. You fall through a piece of glass and cut your artery. Okay, if you just let it bleed and don't do anything about it, you can die in as little as 3 minutes. So it's important for you to react at a minimum, put pressure on it and hold it while you're seeking help. Okay, you have to do something. You can't just stare at it and wait to become unconscious. So put pressure on it. Extend your life. Extend your life until EMS can get to you. That's the goal of all of this, is keeping you alive until EMS can get to your side. All right, let's go over the spots on the body. Again, arms and legs. Starts with direct pressure, then a tourniquet application. You could also pack a wound if you need to in an arm or a leg. Okay? Neck, armpits, and groin, places we can't use a tourniquet. Starts with direct pressure, then a wound packing technique, preferably with a hemostatic agent. Okay? Areas on the body. From the diaphragm up, front back, direct pressure, then a waterproof chest seal. Okay? Something that doesn't let air move in and out. Diaphragm down to the waistline, front and back. Direct pressure, then a pressure dressing. We're going to get into all of those things in just a second. All right, so tourniquet applications, how does that work? Let's take you through the tourniquet first. I'm going to show you the tourniquet, what it looks like, and how it works. So this tourniquet that I'm holding in my hand is called a CAT tourniquet, C-A-T, Combat Application Tourniquet. The pieces of the tourniquet, we have the buckle, okay? The windlass rod. This is the windlass clip. This is the windlass lock. And then we have the self-adhering band or the Velcro strap, okay? Now, what is the tourniquet doing? It's clamping off the blood flow. It's like taking a hose, a garden hose, and kinking it, right? It stops the water from coming out of the hose. Well, that's what we're doing with a tourniquet. We're kinking the artery and vein and stopping the blood flow, okay? So how do we use this thing? Well, first of all, when you open a CAT tourniquet, it's stretched out just like this, okay? It looks just like this. It's folded and it's nice and tight. All you do is open it and it's in a loop. It's ready to use. You can slide it on your own arm, somebody else's arm or leg. Very simple, okay? Slide it on the arm. We go high and tight, as far up the limb as we can go. It doesn't matter where the injury is. We're going to go all the way up the limb as high as we can go, cover the whole limb. We pull the strap tight, get as much Velcro as you can, keeping the strap as tight as you can. Okay, this should be tight, hard to put your fingers under it right now. Okay, the next step is we turn this windlass rod. We're going to turn that until the bleeding stops. Okay, you just keep turning it until the bleeding stops. And then we drop the windlass rod into that clip so it doesn't loosen up. Pull what's left over through the clip and lock it all down with the white tab.
And for how long you can stay like that?
That's a good question. So the manufacturer says that you can keep this tourniquet on for 2 hours or less and have no permanent damage. But we know for a fact they're being very, very conservative with that number. We have had many, many victims wear a tourniquet for 8, 10, 12 hours and not have any permanent damage. In fact, I'm one. So I'm sure you guys all noticed this disaster, right? That's a blast injury, okay? I wore a tourniquet the first day I wore a tourniquet for 8 hours before I got into surgery, and then I wore it all during surgery. I had 5 surgeries to repair my hand, and each surgery was a minimum of 8 or a maximum of 14 hours, and I had a tourniquet on the entire time. So it's not really about how long you've had it on, it's how you take it off. If you take it off properly, there's no damage. And that being said, we don't take it off. Once you've applied a tourniquet on someone, you leave it there. They take it off in the hospital in a controlled environment. We don't take it off in the field. You want to
باختصار هذا الخيط دابا اللي وراكم هو كيساعد باش يقطع الدم، يعني باش ما يمشيش مع العروق. وقال لك يعني هذه تقدر تبقى في اليد ديال الواحد لمدة 2 ساعة لا أكثر، لمدة 2 ساعة. إلا فات 2 ساعة كاينين شي حالات يعني يقدر يكون يعني واحد العاهة مستدامة، يعني يقدر يتقطع له يوقع البتر ديال اليد. إلا ما وقعش يعني غادي يكون يعني بحال شلل يا إما كلي يا نصفي يعني يا جزئي. كنهضروا على اليد. وهذا الخيط ملي يتركب ما كيتحيدش الا من طرف الاطباء. الا تركب خاصو يتحيد في السبيطار. صوت الاخوان المايك.
Got him. I got him. All right. Any questions so far? Anybody have any questions about anything we've covered so far? All right. I don't understand how that keeps happening.
الإخوان المايك، سدوا المايك عافاكم. نبقاو نعاودوا نفس الهضرة.
All right. So now you notice the screen says put the tourniquet 2 to 3 inches above the wound. We don't do that. We follow what the military does, and we go high and tight. We cover the entire limb. It takes the thought process out of it. I don't have to remember any of that. High and tight, or go high or die, okay? We absolutely do not put a tourniquet over the elbow or the knee. The artery and vein run through the joint in those locations, and we're crushing that artery and vein against the bone. So if I can't get to the artery and vein, it's not going to work. So we go above the knee, above the elbow. We tighten that windlass rod until the bleeding stops. And then again, we do not remove it once we've applied it. What's great about the tourniquet is you could apply it to yourself or others, self-aid or buddy aid. And we could also put it over our clothing. Okay, when would we put it over the clothing? If I don't see the injury, how am I supposed to? What if you're the one that's injured? If I'm the one that's injured, if I'm shot in the arm or shot in the leg, I know I'm shot in the arm or leg, put the tourniquet on high, make it as tight as you can, and then cut the clothing off and look for the injury. If you're still bleeding and you can't tighten the tourniquet anymore, put a second tourniquet on. Put it just above the first one. Okay, if you can't put it just below. But they should be side by side. I shouldn't have a tourniquet up here and a tourniquet down here. Okay. What else? Tourniquets, they hurt. It doesn't feel good. Okay. Even when you're not injured, it hurts to put a tourniquet on. Imagine what it would feel like if you had a gunshot wound to your arm, or, piece of glass sticking out of your arm. Of course it's going to hurt. It doesn't mean it's on incorrectly. Okay. Don't take it off once you put it on. There's a bunch of different tourniquets on the market, probably 15 or 20 different manufacturers. They all may look a little different, but if it has a windlass rod, it has some kind of a strap, and it has a lock to lock it down and make it tight. Okay, they all work the same way. Make the strap as tight as you can make it, right? Turn the windlass till the bleeding stops, and then lock it all down. Okay, it should only take you like 15 or 20 seconds to put the tourniquet on. It takes a little bit of practice to get it on that quickly, but once you've put the tourniquet on a couple times, it's a very simple technique to use. All right. So bleeding control in children. It's exactly the same as it is in adults with one major exception. Okay, commercial tourniquets do not work on small babies, infants and toddlers. That's about as small as I could make that, much bigger than an infant or toddler's arm or leg. So if it's too big for them, it's not going to work. So what do we do if it's an infant or a toddler? We use the other two techniques. We use pressure, okay, that works just the same, and wound packing works just the same on an infant or a toddler. Obviously, you're going to press less hard on an infant than you would on me, but it's all relevant, right? The tighter you, when it becomes an infant, you push until the bleeding stopped, okay, no harder. A toddler, same thing, you push until the bleeding is stopped. Now, you know, I've never heard of an infant needing a tourniquet application. I'm sure it's happened, but I've never seen one. Toddlers, on the other hand, it happens pretty often.
It's even too easy to hold the plate
Pressure
for the blood. Yeah.
Sure, sure it is. It's not hard. It's an easy technique. The problem with children is this: they go into shock much different than adults do. If an adult goes into shock, it's not the end of the world. We can still save their life. It's not good, don't get me wrong, but it's not the end of their life. We can still save them. A child, on the other hand, when they get to that point where they start showing symptoms of shock, they become confused, they can become combative and want to fight with you, they become unconscious, they're very, very near death. You don't have a lot of time to get them to the hospital and get that blood back in their body. So just keep that in mind when it comes to children. So other things, let's talk about impaled objects. Somebody has something sticking out of their body. Okay, they fall on a piece of rebar, or there's a knife sticking out of somebody. We don't pull that stuff out. We leave it in place. It's a bad idea to rip it out of their body. If we do, we can cause further injury. So the goal is to keep it in the body, bandage it in place so it doesn't move, okay, and then get them to the hospital as quickly as we can. Someone who loses an arm or a leg, we consider that a life-threatening bleed. No matter how it happens, it's a life-threatening bleed. Now, how it happens could make it look like it's not that serious of an injury, believe it or not. Obviously, if you lose a limb, it's a serious injury. But the point is that if it's a very clean cut, it may not bleed very bad at first. It may take a while for it to start bleeding. Your body has a natural reaction to stop the life-threatening bleeding, and it does that by retracting arteries and veins up into big muscles and then spasming those muscles around those arteries and veins. Eventually, your body will relax and you'll start to bleed. Versus a really bad accident where somebody mangles a leg or mangles an arm. There's no muscle left to retract and cause that spasm, so that person's going to bleed out much quicker. Regardless of how it happens, put a tourniquet on high and tight. Make it as high as you can and make it as tight as you can, and you'll save that person's life. Okay?
واحد النقطة مهمة اللي شار ليها الأستاذ أنه ملي تكون شي حاجة داخلة مثلا في الجسم ما تحيدوهاش. اللي مختصين في هذا الشيء هما اللي يحيدوها في لوبيطال، يا الطبيب يا اللي مختص هو اللي غيحيد هذيك الحاجة. مثلا سميتو شي عصا يعني ماضية دخلت في اليد ولا في الرجل ولا في شي بلاصة ما تحيدوهاش.
So improvised tourniquets, that's the last thing on the list right here that we're going to talk about. Improvised tourniquets. They say that improvised tourniquets are less effective than a commercial tourniquet. Well, that's like saying driving to California is less effective than flying to California. Of course it is, right? The airplane's made to get me there quickly, but the car still works, right? So an improvised tourniquet will still work, but you need to know how to make one, and you need to know how to keep it tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you quickly how I make an improvised tourniquet. Sure. So again, I would go high and tight, all the way up the arm as high as I can go. I'm going to show you here so it's nice and easy for you to see. Okay. So first thing, take a piece of fabric, anything fabric. It needs to be at least 2 inches in width. That tourniquet is 2 inches in width. Now I need to find a windlass rod. In this case, I've just got a little multi-tool. It's just a pocket knife. Okay, I'm going to put it in the knot. I'm going to tie the knot nice and tight around the fabric, and I'm going to start turning. Okay, I'm going to turn and turn and turn. I'm going to turn this until the bleeding stops. Once the bleeding has stopped, my next step is to lock this down. If I just let go, it's going to unwind, right? So look, he's bleeding. He's not dead. Hold this for me. Put your hand on there so it doesn't spin. Hold it tight. Now I'm just going to find another product, something else I have to bandage it up and make it tight so it doesn't loosen up. All right, let that loosen up.
فهمت دابا يعني قال هذه مختلفة على هذه الأولى اللي ورا لنا، هذه مختلفة عليها. هذه فيها هي إلاستيك يعني كتجبد، ولكن خاصك تعرف كيفاش تزيرها.
Tell them it's better to not use the elastic, to use fabric, solid fabric.
قال يعني هذه يعني من الأحسن ما تستعملوش هذه، استعملوا الأخرى.
This is all I had laying around. That's why I used that. You get that first knot out for you. All right. There you go. That's all I had laying around right there. That's otherwise I would use his necktie is actually like one of the best things you could use to make a tourniquet. A woman's scarf, whatever you have access to, fold it so that it's 2 inches in width. Make that first wrap as tight as you can. Thank you, sir. And then get a windlass rod in there and turn it until the bleeding stops. Okay. So on your screen, we're looking at commercial, they call them emergency trauma dressings. So you may have heard of Israeli dressing, field dressing, military dressing, an army dressing, okay? Pressure bandage, whatever you want to call it, they're talking about an elastic bandage, like an ACE bandage. It's elastic with the dressing built into it, okay? This particular bandage is one that we use pretty often here. This one, again, is called, we call them all emergency trauma bandages. We have no term for them. It's an ACE bandage with the dressing built in. The dressing is the part that goes on the wound. The bandage holds the dressing in place. Okay, it could be made out of the tan ACE bandage material, or it could be just a green fabric. Sometimes they make it black. It doesn't matter. If it's elastic and has the dressing built into it, it's an emergency trauma dressing. Can I borrow your arm again? Sure. I'm going to show you how to use this one. Pretty simple. Put the white stuff on the red stuff. See, it's got a piece of plastic right here. That plastic is a lever to make it tighter. So if the injury's right here, I'm going to stop the bleeding, then cover it. Okay, on that first wrap, we're going to go above, we're going to go below, then we're going to go into the clip. Okay, and then I'm going to go the other direction, coming back this way. And that's where I'm getting my pressure from. And now I'm just going to wrap as tight as I can. Okay, pull that elastic out as I wrap. Pull the elastic out as I wrap. The tighter I make it, the better. And at the end, it doesn't matter which bandage you use, it has a clip like this. It's just a clothing clip. Just pull the fabric up somewhere, clip it in place, and you're good to go. Okay, very simple.
Okay. يعني هذيك المنطقة البيضاء اللي وراكم هذيك اللي كتمشي مباشرة على الجرح وتدورها. يعني هذا البلاستيكة البيضاء هنايا كتساعدنا باش نزيرو هذا البندا مزيان. كتشوفوها هذه.
Pretty simple stuff. Now, we don't bandage bleeding wounds. We stop the bleeding first, then we bandage the wound. That's important to remember. This is not strong enough. It doesn't apply enough pressure to stop bleeding on its own. Okay, so we need to stop the bleeding first, then we can bandage the wound. So now this brings me to my next part of this. We never use this as a primary treatment, okay? We use pressure, we use the tourniquet, we use something else, unless, one exception, unless it's a belly injury, right in here. Okay, when you have a hole in your belly, okay, if I took a knife and went, what's going to happen? I just pour out, right? Your intestines pour out, your body organs will pour out of that hole, okay? It's nasty, it looks really bad, not necessarily fatal. Okay, we could actually save that person. You lie them flat, you pile the stuff back on the belly and bandage it in place so that it's there and it doesn't hang all over. Get that person to the hospital. Not much we could do about that person in the field. Okay, but a hole, single hole, gunshot wound, okay, something that looks like this will do the same thing over time. Okay, you get a bullet hole, stab wound. Okay, if you don't put pressure on that, in a few minutes you get a little bump, and then after that bump you get a sausage link, and then a bigger one, and then a bigger one, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, the goal is to prevent that from happening, and the way we do that is by putting pressure on it and holding it, and then using the pressure dressing to hold it in place. Okay, pressure and hold until somebody gives you this bandage, and then wrap the bandage around the waist bunch of times. Make it as tight as you can. Build another set of skin and muscle over that hole so that it can't get worse and worse and worse. All right. Injuries, last thing we're going to talk about. Injuries to the chest, okay? From the diaphragm up, front and back. A hole in somebody's chest. It's not really the bleeding that we're concerned about. There's not much we can do about bleeding in the chest or the belly, right? What's our treatment for bleeding? Is pushing on it and then using a tourniquet, or pushing on it and packing that wound. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, we're only packing wounds in arms and legs in junctional areas. Okay, we cannot pack a wound in the body. Can't do that. Okay, so what do? We put moderate pressure, and then we seal it. In this case, diaphragm up, front, and back, we're worried about air traveling in and out of that hole. So even if there is bleeding, there's still air movement in and out of that hole, and we don't want that. What happens is air will get in that hole. Every time you breathe in and out, you suck air into that hole. The air pressurizes in your chest. It gets worse and worse. It collapses the lung on the injured side first, then pushes everything to the other side, collapsing the lung on the other side, and putting pressure on your heart. Okay, it's called a tension pneumothorax. And the only way to stop that from happening is to seal the hole off with something waterproof. Okay, your gloved hand, or if you put your hand over a plastic bag and pressed on it, that would seal it off. Take a same plastic bag, cut a piece off of it, cover the hole, and tape all four sides of it all the way around so that air can't get in or out of that hole. Seal it. Okay, it's called a chest seal. I have, if you shoot me 1 second, I'll show you what a commercial chest seal looks like, and then we can improvise these, right? We can make them. So this is a hyphen-vented chest seal. You open it and take it out of the package. It's got a little 4x4 on there so that you can just kind of wipe the area off. And then it's just a big sticker. It's a decal. We peel it off, and we center that triangle right over the hole. Center it right over the injury, seal it down as tight as you can, and you're done. Take that person to the hospital, get them to the hospital. Okay? As far as how long it takes for a tension pneumothorax to start affecting the victim, it all depends on the person and how the injury happens, as to how long it's going to take. Sometimes it happens very quickly. Sometimes it happens over time, over hours. So you don't know how long it's going to take. Once it starts to happen, the person can get very sick very fast. So we don't wait for that to happen. We go to the hospital as quickly as we can. All right. All right. And these are a bunch of different commercial chest seals that are on the market. The one on the bottom left, that's the hyphen-vented chest seal. That's what I just showed you. The one on the top, that's called the Asherman chest seal. That's a vent that's in the center of it. It looks like a whoopee cushion valve. Center that vent over the hole. Okay. That triangle I showed you in this one is the vent. Center that over the hole. The other stuff that's on the screen, AED pads, duct tape, okay, they're improvised chest seals. There's no reason we can't use just the pad by itself and stick it over the hole and seal it down. That'll keep air from moving in and out of the hole. Okay? All right. All right, guys. Let's talk about before we wrap this up. We'll talk about a couple of other types of bleeds. So I noticed on the list we have a nosebleed. People ask what we do for a nosebleed. So it really doesn't matter what type of nosebleed it is. Okay, whether it comes from a natural cause like high blood pressure or dry skin from the weather or whatever, or it comes from trauma. Either way, if you tilt your head back when you have a nosebleed, the blood's going to run down your throat and into your stomach, and it's going to make you sick. It's no good to tilt your head back. It's a natural reaction to want to tilt your head back and pinch, but what we do is we actually tilt our nose forward. Okay, tilt your nose forward and pinch the base of your nose. Okay, that'll get the blood to stop. If it's trauma, if it's an injury and you can't press on your nose because it hurts too bad, lean forward and let the blood come out instead of going back down your throat. You just put your fingers in the base of your nose and just hold it there so the blood stays in your nostril instead of pouring out. That's like the only thing you could do for nosebleed. Again, if you go to the hospital, they'll use a couple different devices that will they'll actually insert into your nostril, and they use a chemical to kind of burn the artery closed so you stop bleeding. Again, in the field, lean forward, pinch your nose. Okay. When somebody has a nosebleed or a facial injury, any kind of facial injury that's going to affect their breathing, they're going to find a position that's comfortable. It's called tripoding.
I'm sorry, Mr. George. I'm just going to explain one thing.
Yes, please.
بالنسبة كما يعني معروف عندنا الواحد ملي كيترعف يعني كيسيل له الدم النيف، حنا كنديروا له هكا وكنهزوا له الراس. لا ما ديرش هكاك، بالعكس سير لقدام هكا. الراس خاصو يتحنى لتحت، ماشي العكس، ماشي هكا، حيت اصلا الراس ملي كيكون هكا الدماغ ديالنا الدم ديالو كيهبط ويقدر الانسان يفقد الوعي. فهمتوا؟ يعني ملي يكون الانسان كيسيل له الدم للنيف خاص يدير للراس هكا، يحنيه مزيان وتعطي له الماء بارد باش يغسل الوجه ديالو.
Okay. So if somebody has a facial injury, whatever cause it, doesn't matter. What happens is you start to have trouble breathing. If your nose is very injured along with your mouth, you start to have trouble breathing. Okay, and what we do for people that have trouble breathing from an injury like that is we encourage them to find a position that's comfortable. Okay, and they usually call that position a tripod position. Generally, when somebody has a chest injury or a facial injury, they're going to want to lean forward and lean against something. Okay, it kind of takes the weight off of their chest. It makes it easier for them to breathe. If they're bleeding, the blood is going to fall out and away, and their natural reaction will find that position that makes it easier for them to breathe. So what we don't want to do is force them to lie flat, okay, or force them into a certain position. Let them find a position that's comfortable. If they can't find a position that's comfortable, encourage them to lean forward. Sit up and lean forward, or actually stand, lean forward. Okay, that's the easiest way to explain that. And I have seen people with facial injuries and bystanders force them to lie flat. And then that person that's lying flat is extremely uncomfortable and they start fighting with you to get up. And then that bystander's holding them down because they think it's the right thing to do.
And even sometimes when someone have the injury, he don't like the people to talk to him. Just keep quiet.
Yeah. That's true.
Find the way.
That's exactly right. You're absolutely right.
كيهضر دابا على واحد القضية، الإنسان ملي توقع له الانجري يعني شي إصابة كما كانت، قال لك خلي هذاك المريض يلقى هو ديك الوضعية اللي مرتاح فيها. يعني ما تقولوش لا واه نعس على ظهرك لا واه نعس على جنبك، خليه هو براسو غادي يلقى الوضعيه اللي يرتاح فيها وغادي يبقى تما. فهم؟
Right. The last thing I see on the list, hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. Okay, low blood sugar. So this is really simple. Most people that are non-diabetics, people that are not a diabetic, tend to are not really affected by hypoglycemia so much. Okay, can it happen? It can happen. And most people know, right? When you haven't eaten in a certain amount of time, you're hungry, you're starving, you need some sugar, you eat, you catch up to yourself. More importantly, in pregnant women, it may affect them. A non-diabetic, it may affect them because the baby is sucking that sugar down, and it catches her off guard. And even pregnant women know it may happen kind of quick, but they know their knees start to get weak. They sit down, they eat a candy bar, or they have some kind of carbohydrate, bread, peanut butter, things like that, and it'll boost them up. But somebody who's diabetic, okay, they could lose their blood sugar pretty quickly, and then they can't do anything about it. They become incapacitated. So what can we do for that person? Well, bottom line, when a person's a diabetic, okay, they have diabetes, if they become altered in any way, they're confused, they're speaking out of their head, whatever it may be, it would never hurt to give them a little bit of sugar. We have to make sure that that person can swallow. It's that simple. If you could talk to them, you give them some fluids, orange juice, soda with sugar, like regular soda, not diet soda. A glass of water with a scoop of sugar in it stirred up, okay? Give them a straw. If they could swallow, give them the sugar.
Is there any way so they can know if that guy has like diabetic or something?
So what we do is we look for what they call medic alert bracelet, okay? A bracelet, a necklace, a tattoo, okay? A lot of diabetics will wear that to tell people around them when they're unconscious, well, hey, I'm a diabetic, and that'll, as first responders, I pull up, I find somebody unconscious, I check their wrists, I check their neck, and I look for that. Nowadays, you could use the cell phone. Right next to the 911 tab, there's something called ICE or ICE, or in case of emergency, and it will, let me see. My phone will do it. It's a work phone, and I don't have it set up for that, so it doesn't.
كيتحدث على الانسان اللي عنده السكر، يكون طالع ولا نازل. قال لك ملي يطيح الانسان وتعرف انه عنده المشكل ديال السكر، خاص تعطيه يا اما شي حلوه، المهم شي عصير تكون فيه سميتو يكون فيه السكر.
The other thing you could do is ask the person, if they're still conscious but confused, say, are you a diabetic? And almost always, if they can't talk, they'll nod. They understand that word diabetes, they understand diabetic, and they will nod. Just because they can't talk at the moment and they're slurring speech or they're not making sense doesn't mean they don't understand what you're saying. All right, they lose the ability to talk to you, but they don't lose the ability to understand. Almost always, once you give them some sugar, they'll wake up and say, wow, I was trying to say thank you and bird was coming out of my mouth, and they remember it. They remember. So,
but it's not gonna hurt if he was anything else beside the diabetic. If you give him like sugar,
right,
it's not gonna hurt.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. Even if they have high sugar, and that's why they're sick right now, it's not going to make it any worse because it doesn't affect them fast enough to make it any worse. If it only help.
قال لك دابا سميتو يعني الانسان ملي كيطيح وانت كتشك انه مثلا حنا يعني كاساتذه عندنا القاعات ديالنا كنعرفوا الانسان يعني هذا ازمه مثلا، وكنعرفوا هذا يعني فيه السكر، يعني كنعرفوا ان في هذاك المرض المزمن. يعني ملي توقع له شي حاله ديجا انت عندك فكره مسبقه انه هذاك الانسان مريض. يعني قال لك بالنسبه للناس اللي عندهم السكر، ولو يكون طالع نازل كتعطيه السكر، ولو الانسان يكون انكونشس يعني فاقد الوعي ديالو، يعني ماشي فاقد تماما ولكن هو كيشوف فيك ولكن ما قادرش يهضر. هو راه كيسمع لك وعارف اش كتقول ليه ولكن ما يقدرش يجاوب. مع ذلك خاصك تعطيه الماء اللي فيه السكر ولا المنشي سائل اللي فيه يكون فيه السكر، عاد غادي يستعد سميتو القدره ديالو باش يهضر.
I'm gonna get one more mannequin. I want to talk about choking.
اوكي.
Okay, let me just go grab this device. I'll do choking in adult, child, and infant. Okay. All right. All right, guys. Let's talk about choking. We're going to talk about choking in adult, child, and infant. All right. There's a couple things we need to know about a person before we can determine whether they're choking. First and foremost, an adult. Okay. What are they going to do? We've all choked on something. Everyone that's in this meeting has choked on something for a second or two, right? We know that feeling of sheer panic, right? When someone is in a group of people and they start to choke, they want to leave. They don't want to be in that group still. Why? Because you're going to cough that item out in front of everyone. It's embarrassing and you want to leave. Okay. You want to go to the bathroom. You want to go out of the room. If that happens, if somebody starts to choke, someone needs to go with that person, even if it's a partial airway obstruction. So what's the difference between partial and complete? The bottom line is sound. Okay. If somebody starts to choke and they're coughing, we don't do anything for that person. We wait. Okay. We encourage them to cough it out, that kind of thing. But that can easily go to a complete airway obstruction. And that happens by sound. We know by sound, right? We wait for that person to completely lose sound. Now we have silent cough, a silent cry, and panic. For an adult, they tend to grab at their throat or grab at their chest. So ask the person, are you choking? And if they nod yes, now it's time to act. Now we can do something about it. So
يهضر دابا على الاختناق. يعني مثلا تقدر تكون يا اما شي صدمه الانسان كتشوفو مثلا او لا مثلا يعني كيوقع بسبب الجفاف، يعني مشى يدير سبور شي بلاصه مثلا شي مرات كتجري بزاف وما كاينش الماء، كتحس يعني بالحلق ديالك ما تقدرش تنفس، او لا كتوقع شي صدمه او لا كليتي شي حاجه وحلات لك. هادشي علاش كيهضر دابا وغادي يعطي الحلول. Thank you.
Okay, so first thing we want to do is come up from behind the person. We need to get a good solid stance, right? Good solid stance, because if our Heimlich maneuver doesn't work, what's going to happen? They're going to pass out on us. So if they pass out, don't be fooled by that. If your feet are right next to each other and they pass out, they're going to drag you right to the ground. So get a good solid stance, reach from around the person, pull them in next to you, reach around, find their belly button with one finger. Okay, when you find their belly button, reach around, make a fist with the other hand, put it right over your finger, and then turn up like that. If you turn up from your finger, that's going to put you right in the middle of the abdomen, right? And then what do we want to do? The Heimlich maneuver is this, right? We want that waterfall motion right into their diaphragm. We're trying to knock the wind out of the person. That's what the Heimlich maneuver is. Okay, I bet you everybody on this screen can knock the wind out of somebody, right? Or you've had the wind knocked out of you. And you know how hard it is to do that. It's not an easy, light technique. We need to, as hard as we can, hit that person in the diaphragm and try and get them to knock that item out. Okay, that's the Heimlich maneuver, is reaching around and hitting that diaphragm as hard as we could. Now, in an adult, you're going to be same size as the person, roughly. You're going to reach around, find that spot, and wham, hit the diaphragm. For a child, you might actually have to take a knee and get down to their level and pull them in nice and close to you. But the technique is the same. Okay, the technique is the same. Find their belly button, make a fist, roll it up, and the maneuver is reaching around and hitting that diaphragm as hard as we could. Now, in an adult, you're going to be same size as the person, roughly. You're going to reach around, find that spot, and wham, hit the diaphragm. For a child, you might actually have to take a knee and get down to their level and pull them in nice and close to you. But the technique is the same, okay? The technique is the same. Find their belly button, make a fist, roll it up, and whack that diaphragm. Get them to cough that item out, okay? If you're doing the Heimlich maneuver and it's not working, it's not getting that item out, what's going to happen? They're going to pass out, right? They're going to become unconscious. It doesn't take long. It only takes about 4 minutes for a person to become unconscious when they're not breathing. So if they become unconscious, the technique is this, okay? They fall to the ground, assist them to the ground, keep an eye on their head so they don't hit their head. Once they get to the ground, we go right to CPR, go right to the compressions. Center of their chest, do 30 compressions, okay? 28, 29, 30. Before you go to give a breath, look in their mouth, see if you can see the object. If you can see the object, pull it out and give a breath. If you can't see the object, try and give a breath. We know whether that went in because we look for that chest rise, okay? If we don't get that chest rise, go right back to compressions, 30 more compressions. And then we look in the mouth before we give a breath. Every time we do 30 compressions before we give a breath, we look in their mouth to make sure the object hasn't come up and we can reach it. Okay? You want to explain that?
real quick. بالنسبة للإنسان مثلا اللي كلا شي حاجة وحلت ليه في الحلق ديالو، مثلا تقدر ماكلة، تقدر تكون مسكة ولا شي حاجة، يعني كدير هذيك اللعيبه اللي قال لكم هكا وكتجبد هكا، ماشي هكا، كتجبد يعني بشكل مموج للفوق، صافي. رانا دابا الانسان الى يعني هذيك الطريقه ما خدماتش وفقد الوعي ديالو، هذه عاوتاني غادي نديرو مع السي بي ار، يعني التنفس الاصطناعي. وملي كتوصل كتدفع وتوصل 30 ما كتمشيش وتعطيه التنفس الاصطناعي، لا، كتقلب بعد هذاك الشيء يعني اللي كان حاصل له هنايا واش طلع ولا مازال. عادي الا مازال ما شتيش عاد كتعطيه التنفس. اوكي.
All right. So now, adult and child, that's how we do the Heimlich maneuver. For a little baby infant, we have to do it differently. If we pull on their abdomen like that, we're going to hurt them. We can't do that. So what we do with an infant, and identifying that they're choking is one of the issues, right? How do we know an infant is choking? An adult and a child, we could say, hey, are you choking? And they're going to nod yes. An infant isn't going to do that, right? They're not going to answer you. So the key is the same thing, silence. Okay, they're going to panic. Their eyes are going to bulge. Their nose is going to flare. Okay, but silence is the key. A silent cry, a silent cough. Once you've identified they're choking, make the peace sign. One finger on each side of the baby's mouth. Now we rest the baby on our forearm and we hit the back. 5 back blows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sandwich the baby's head. Flip the baby over. 5 chest thrusts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We continue this process. We continue this process until one of two things happens. Either the baby's going to spit the item up, or the baby's going to become unresponsive in your hand, right? 2, 3, 4, 5. If this doesn't work, the baby's going to become unconscious. If the baby becomes unconscious, we put the baby on a hard surface and we do compressions. Okay, we do 30 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 28, 29, 30. Okay, before we give a breath, we look in the mouth and look for the object. Yeah, I'll explain the compressions in a minute. I'm going to do that. We continue. The steps are exactly the same as it is for an adult and a child once the baby becomes unconscious. Okay, now before we go any further, I want to take you through CPR on an infant. Okay, we talked about compressions on an adult and a child. They're the same. Okay, doing a compression on an adult or a child is exactly the same no matter what the age bracket is. Okay, an infant is a little bit different. Okay, how do we know what an infant is age-wise? We're going from newborn to 1 year of age. That's considered an infant. Okay, they're about 1 year of age. So, first of all, we look for the same exact thing in a baby. We look for chest rise. If I don't see chest rise in the baby, I assume that the baby is in cardiac arrest. Okay, it's okay to do that. So we call out for help. Somebody help. Get me an AED. If you can't call yourself, dial 911 on a speakerphone and lay it down next to you. Okay, and then we start compressions. Compressions on an infant are done with 2 fingers, right along the nipple line. Okay, right along the nipple line center. And we're gonna go to a depth of 1.5 inches or 1/3 the depth of the chest. Okay, so we find the center of the chest and we compress. 30 compressions. 28, 29, 30. Head tilt, chin lift, 2 breaths. Okay, we do breaths the same way on an infant as we do as on an adult, a barrier device. Only we cover the entire head, nose, and mouth. Okay, we cover everything. 2 breaths and back to compressions. Okay, another way that you could do compressions on an infant, if you don't like using 2 fingers, you could use 2 thumbs. Wrap your fingers around the baby's chest and use 2 thumbs to do compressions. Okay? Either way, we're doing the same thing, right? We're compressing that heart, pushing that heart in and out, circulating that blood around the body. Okay?
دابا هضر على سميتو على اللي كتعطي التنفس الاصطناعي الكبير ماشي بحال الصغير وماشي بحال الانفانت يعني البيبي. هو كنستعملو غير 2 الصباع صافي، يا اما هكا 2 الصباع يا اما هكا يا اما هكا كتشوفوا.
Does anybody have any questions about anything we've covered today?
Just one of those. That's I think because sometimes they want to go dodging like jogging outside.
Okay, so heat exhaustion versus dehydration. Okay, so we're going to talk about heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and dehydration and the cause and effect. So dehydration, not having enough fluids in your body. Becoming dehydrated is pretty easy, okay? It all depends on your environment. You can become dehydrated in the winter in -10 degrees quicker than you could become dehydrated in 110 degrees, believe it or not. Your body works harder to keep yourself warm than it does to cool yourself off. Okay, so first and foremost, it's very important to stay hydrated. Keep water in you. Okay, you need to drink a lot of water, a lot more than most people do. People don't realize how much water you're supposed to intake. So if you're exerting yourself in the heat, you're going to become dehydrated quickly. Okay, so we need to drink twice as much water as we're losing. Okay, so if you're urinating or sweating, okay, we need to drink twice as much as we're releasing out of our body to stay hydrated. So what are some of the things that we look for? First of all, one of the first symptoms that happens when you start becoming dehydrated is you become nauseous. Okay, you feel your stomach starts to feel a little queasy. You start to become nauseous, and then it gets worse to the point where you feel like you want to vomit. You become dizzy. Okay, your skin will change color. You become pale, and you start to become confused. Okay, the very first symptom is sweating. It's that simple. When you start to sweat like that, you're moving toward dehydration. I mean, I think we all know, right? Once you start sweating, you know what happens. You want to get some more water and you want to drink. If you don't pay attention to what your body's asking for, this is what's going to happen. You become dehydrated. What are some other things that can cause you to become dehydrated? Being sick, having the flu, having a cold, having some kind of ailment will cause you to be dehydrated. Vomiting, diarrhea. Okay, those are two ways your body releases massive amounts of fluid and you don't realize it. So one of the things we'll do is pinch the skin. I'll pinch the skin on my hand and see how it just goes away. It just goes right back to the way it was. If you pinch the skin and it stays like that, it doesn't just drop back, that's showing that you're dry and you're starting to become dehydrated.
كيهضروا دابا على سميتو على dehydration، يعني الجفاف، يعني جفاف الجسم بسبب يا اما الحراره يا سبب الاجهاد. هاد الجوج، يا الحراره يا الاجهاد هما اللي كيسببوا الجفاف في الجسم. و يعني ملي تشوف الانسان كيدخل ويخرج في الهضره، يعني كنتو مثلا كديروا سبور على برا وكانت الحراره بزاف وشتيه مثلا، يعني عينيه كيتقلبوا، يعني كيهضر ما عارفش اش كيقول، وبحال الا بغى يفقد الوعي. يعني هذاك كيتسمى الارهاق بفعل الحراره او الاجهاد.
All right. I'm sorry, you done? Yes?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. So let's talk about heat stroke versus heat exhaustion. First of all, heat stroke is a very serious life-threatening event. Okay, heat exhaustion is on its way to heat stroke, right? If heat exhaustion happens first, and it's the same cause and effect as dehydration. Okay, dehydration will happen first. You become dehydrated. If you completely ignore dehydration, heat exhaustion is coming next, and it really has to do with temperatures of your body, right? Your temperature in your body should be around 98.6 degrees. If you are in a hot environment, you're out in the sun, and you're not hydrating yourself, you will start to sweat, and your temperature will start to rise. When your temperature gets to around 102, 103 degrees, you start to suffer from heat exhaustion. And the symptoms are very similar to dehydration: nausea, vomiting, confusion, and excessive sweating. You want to explain that part of it?
It's okay, go ahead.
Heat stroke, the next step to heat stroke is when you stop sweating. You are extremely hot to the touch and you become, you stop sweating. Now you become unconscious and you can't help yourself. So it's important to stay hydrated and pay attention to what your body is telling you. If you get to the point where you stop sweating and you still feel really hot, okay, your body temperature is really hot, and your skin starts to become cool to the touch, you're suffering from heat stroke, and that's a life-threatening situation. So sweating and hot to the touch is heat exhaustion. No sweat and cool to the touch is heat stroke. Okay, and you're cool to the touch because your body is pulling the blood out of your limbs and putting it into the center of your body to compensate for all of the for the dehydration.
فهمت دابا القضيه فين كاين الاختلاف؟ شنو قال؟ يعني ملي تكون الحراره يعني باينه على برا، كتقيس اللحم ديالك، الجلده ديالك سخونه، يعني هذاك الديهايدريشن. الا كتقيس الجلده ديالك وكتحس بها بارده ولكن الداخل ديالك كتحس بالجفاف، هذاك يعني راه بدايه ديال الستروك. يعني يقدر يوقع الاختناق، تكون شي صدمه داخليه.
Anything else on your list there that you really wanted to cover?
The last one is spinal
injuries. All right, we definitely don't want a spinal injury. You definitely don't want a spinal injury.
No.
Okay, so spinal injuries, spinal cord injuries. So you could break the bones in your spine without a spinal cord injury. Okay, that could happen, right? You could have a compression fracture, right? How does the spine work? It's vertebrae that are stacked on top of one another, okay, and conjoined. Your spinal column or spinal cord runs in between those vertebrae. The vertebrae are there to protect the cord from rupture or any kind of damage. Now, if you have a break in one of those bones and it punctures your spinal cord or ruptures your spinal cord, that's a spinal cord injury. Depending on where that happens is depending on whether you survive or you don't. A spinal cord injury higher up in the neck, higher up toward the base of the skull, can kill you, okay? As you start to move down those 7 vertebrae in your neck, depends on what type of injury you're going to have. The lower side of the neck control your arms and your legs. It's bottom line is when you have a spinal cord injury or you suspect someone who has a spinal cord injury, it's important to immobilize the person, have them flat on the ground without moving, okay, and physically hold their head so they can't move their neck back and forth. Hold them as still as you can. And when we get there, we're going to put a collar on their neck and we're going to put them on a long flat board so that we immobilize them and they can't move. We're going to move them as little as possible. Now, these injuries are very rare, believe it or not. Okay, it's rare that somebody has that kind of an injury. One of the
but the collar is not gonna make the spinal cord fall apart.
No. With the collar, we're not like jamming it on and making it real tight. All we're doing is keeping it so that the victim can't move their head back and forth. That's the goal. Or up and down. It just keeps them in one position. We call it the neutral position, where their nose is straight out in front of them. This would be the sniffing position, right? This is the neutral position. And that's what we're trying to do, is hold that person in the neutral position.
دابا كنهضر على السباينال كورد اللي هو العمود الفقري. ملي كتوقع شي إصابة على مستوى العمود الفقري، دائما حاول ما أمكن أنه المريض يبقى يعني في وضعية مستقيمة، يعني ملقى على الأرض يعني وما يتحركش. ولا لقيت يعني البروتيج اللي كيدار في العنقل من الأحسن باش ما يتحرك لا على اليمين لا على اليسار ولا للوراء ولا للقدام، باش يعني ما تضاعفش الإصابة. وسميتو يعني المستوى ديال سباينال كورد، يعني الى مشيتي انت كتهبط قال لك هذاك يعني كيتحكم في يعني رجلين، يقدر الله يستر يكون شلل. وين انت غادي كتطلع حتى توصل مثلا هنا الى شي واحد مثلا تضرب في هذيك البلاصه، راه الموت. يعني هاد البلاصه يعني حساسه اكثر من التحت.
Other symptoms that a person would suffer from a spinal cord injury could be tingling in their fingers, hands and arms, or tingling in the feet or lower legs. It depends on where the injury happens as to what kind of feeling they're going to have. Obviously, lack of movement in an arm or a leg. If the person can't move their feet or can't move their hands, we're going to suspect a spinal cord injury. And the best thing you can do for that person is keep them as still as possible until trained personnel get there.
Okay.
Right.
شي سؤال للإخوان اللي عنده شي سؤال؟ طرحوا بالعربية، الشلحة، لونجلي، اللي بغيتي انت. شي سؤال الإخوان؟ مرحبا، تفضل.
السلام عليكم شيخ نادر، معك بشير من الجزائر.
مرحبا.
السؤال تاعي هو حول العمود الفقري لما يعني الرياضي يسقط، يعني فهمت لما الرياضي يسقط قلت انه ما لازمش نحركوه من الوضعيه اللي يسقط عليها هكا.
لا انا قال هو انه يعني من الاحسن تحتفظ على الاستقامه ديال الجسد ديالو يعني منبسط على الارض، يعني ما تخليش في هذيك الوضعيه اللي هو عليها فهمتي، يعني خاص ينعس على ظهره.
هل هذا ما يشكلش عليه خطر يعني لما تحاول انه توضعه على يعني على الارض يعني على شكل استقامه، ما يشكلش خطر انه ممكن يعني تأزم له الوضعيه تاعو؟
لا ما يشكلش الخطر، المهم انه ما يتحركش، هذا هو الاهم.
بارك الله فيك شيخ.
مرحبا. شي سؤال اخوان؟
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
عماد صاحب مدينة وجدة، إلا الله يجازيكم بخير، إلا جات على خاطركم. كنت كنشوف الطريقة نتاع الدرس وحلت لي شي حاجة ومشات لي الكونيكسيون، ممكن تعاودوها؟
اوكي، اذا بالنسبه للدري الصغير الا وحلات ليه شي حاجه، عندك جوج صباع، ماشي خمسه، ما هنا عندك جوج صباع، يعني كتدفع هكا، كتشدو هكا رجلين هكا، كتشد يعني هاد 4 الصباع كتشد له سميتو الراس ديالو يكون بين هاد جوج الصباع وبقى تدفع. اوكي، 1 2 3 4 5 المرات. اوكي، وكتقلبوا عاوتاني الجهه الاخرى هكا نفس الشيء 5 المرات، 1 2 3 4 5. كل ما كتقلبوا وتاكد انه هذيك الحاجه اللي كان سارطها ولا شي حاجه واش طلعت ولا مازال. الا مازال غتستمر الى تعذرت ان هذيك الحاجه، يعني انت كدير هاد الاسعافات وصحاب الاسعاف يعني جايين في الطريق، يعني كلف شي واحد يتصل بهم، يعني ما ديرهاش عادي. لما كايناش النتيجه عاد تعيط لهم، لا عيط لهم في الحين، عاد تما بدا كدير العمليه ديالك.
شكرا أستاذ.
مرحبا.
Sir,
Yes.
please, what about the bleeding nose?
What about that?
Bleeding nose. Someone who is bleeding from his nose.
Okay, we want to lean forward and pinch the nose. That's the goal. Is not to lean back, but lean forward. Pinch the nose and lean forward. If you lean back, the blood's going to go down their throat and into their belly and make them sick. If you lean forward, pinch the nose, it'll stop the bleeding. If it doesn't stop the bleeding, it comes out instead of going back down. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
السلام عليكم.
Sir?
شي سؤال يا اخوان؟
أستاذ فريد.
مرحبا، تفضل.
أخويا بغيت نسولك على كيفاش نقوم بإسعاف شخص مصاب بالفك.
الصوت كان تقطع شويه، ما سمعتكش مزيان، عاود السؤال من فضلك.
أستاذي كيفاش يمكن لي أن نقوم بإسعاف شخص مصاب على مستوى الفك؟
على مستوى الفخذ، الفك.
الفم.
الفك. He was asking about like if somebody he get injury in this part.
Okay.
Like he was like, let's say he was like running in the Georgia and he fell and he fell up in this part.
And the injury is in the bottom jaw?
Yeah.
Bottom of his jaw.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is breathing. As long as his airway is open, just like any other fracture, keep it still, and we need x-rays to see how to set it. A lower jaw injury, there's not much we could do in the field, but keep the person's airway open so that they can breathe. Just like any other facial injury, if they're bleeding, let the blood come out as opposed to going back down and blocking off their breathing.
اوكي. في حالة انه اذا كان يعني الدم كيخرج، حاول ما امكن هذاك الدم ما يرجعش للداخل، ما يرجعش يمشي للمعدة حيت غادي يمرض. اما اذا كان يعني ما كاينش الدم، يعني اللي نقدروا نديروه اننا نتاكدوا ان الشخص كيتنفس. هذا اللي هو مهم. اذا كان كيتنفس يعني الاسعاف غتجي وتديه للسبيطار، هما اللي غادي يعرفوا شنو غادي يديروا ليه. اما حنا الدور ديالنا انه نتاكدوا ان المريض كيتنفس. في هذه الحاله اللي انت هضرتي عليها.
اوكي، شكرا استاذ.
مرحبا.
ممكن واحدة كيستيون؟
مرحبا.
السلام عليكم بعدا.
عليكم السلام.
شكرا جزيلا، يعني thank you for this presentation. أنا بغيت غير نعقب على واحد القضية سي فريد.
مرحبا.
بالنسبة للأستاذ الكبير اللي راه شرح ما فيه الكفاية، غير بعض الملاحظات. كانت القضية ديال الاختناق ديال يكون ان كور اترونجي او نيفو ديال هذا لا غورج. يعني واحد لو كور اترونجي واحد الجسم بلعتي شي حاجه وبقات لك في الحلق. دابا هذه في هذه الحاله غير باش نبين للاخوان راه كنفرقوا ما بين partial obstruction and complete obstruction. يعني واحد الاختناق تام والاختناق الجزئي. دونك يعني بالنسبه للكومبليت اوبستركشن، يعني فاش الانسان ما تيقدرش يتنفس.
الاستاذ سبيل، اسمح لي الاستاذ سبيل. هو شر لهاد المساله اللي انت كتهضر عليها دابا، انه يعني كنديروا يعني الاسعاف ديالنا والمريض باقي يعني في الوعي ديالو. رانا دابا الا انت مازال كدير الاسعاف ديالك والمريض يعني فقد الوعي، يعني قال لك هو كتستمر في اعطاء الاسعاف، بينما انه الاسعافات الاول اصحاب الاسعاف يجيو. فهم؟
اسمح لي سي فريد، عبد الرحمن معاك، ماشي سي سبيل. اولا
مرحبا.
بالنسبه غير بغيت هذه القضيه، يعني هذيك لا ميثود ديال اللي دار الاستاذ هي لا ميثود دو هيمليش، تسمى لا ميثود دو هيمليش. هذيك تدار اون كاو يعني بنادم ما كيتنفسش. اما ملي تيكون الانسان مثلا مختنق عنده واحد لوكور اترونجي وتيهضر معاك، تيقول لك لا راه تيهضر، مازال تيهضر، بمعنى انه تيتنفس. هذاك ما كديرلوش ديك لا ميثود، كتخليه كتحاول ما امكن تبروفوكيه باش يفتح ولا يدير باش يخرج داك لوكور اترونجي. فهمتيني؟ واحد السؤال عاوتاني الا كان ممكن تعطيه الاستاذ، هو غادي يفيدنا في هذه القضيه. مثلا بالنسبه لواحد اللي عنده اون بليسور بلادين وطيح في الطريق مثلا، وني اوبليجي انه نديوه لواحد لوبيطال اللي هو بعيد مثلا، وغادي نديروا ليه هذاك دو تورنيكيت، يعني كتسمى له كارو. وكانت واحد لا ديستونس كبيره، يعني اكثر من ساعتين. يعني هذا لوكا شنو خاصنا نديروا له؟
هذا هو السؤال ديالك. مرحبا الاستاذ عبد الرحمن. هو الا كنتي متبع معنا مزيان قبيلات ملي كان كيشرح في هذا لوبجي هذا، وكان هضر على هذا التيشو هذا اللي هو اللي كيسد الوونز الجروح. راه هذا الا درتي هذا اون فوا، يعني الدم ما كيبقاش كيسيل، يعني تقدر تمشي حتى يعني ساعتين ماشي مشكل. يعني المهم انه الدم ما بقاش يسيل.
شكرا سي فريد، شكرا. ثانك يو فور ذيس بريزنتيشن.
مرحبا.
Thank you. You're welcome.
اوكي. شكرا لكم جميعا. إلا كان لا 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 الاستاذ كان نطلب سميتو، حيت الاستاذ عنده دابا يعني القسم كيتسناه، يعني راه حنا خدينا من وقته بزاف، يعني كنشكروه على هذا التواضع اللي دار معنا. واللي عنده
استاذ فريد، اذا كان ممكن اخر سؤال صغير بسيط اذا كان ممكن.
انا شوف انا شوف صيفط لي السؤال في الجروب عندنا في الواتساب، اوكي. الا كان يعني كيستعصي انني نجاوب، انا غادي نتصل به في التليفون وغادي يصيفط لي الاوديو على الجواب ديالك
ونصيفط بزربه. لا صغير، نقدر الاستاذ فريد نقولوا بزربه، لان حنا عندنا قاعات رياضيه.
اوكي يلا تفضل.
نشوفوا كيستعمل بالغاز، يعني اذا تسرب الغاز وقع عندنا شي اغماء عن طريق ذاك الغاز، كيفاش يمكن لينا نسعفوا بعض التلاميذ اذا كانت سخفوا او مات؟ هذا هو السؤال ديالي.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing we didn't talk about. He was asking about the intoxication, gas intoxication. Yeah.
Gas intoxication. Carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide.
Yeah, just like
Okay. So cause of carbon monoxide, right? Exhaust fumes from a utility or a gas or diesel engine running inside of a building. The key is detecting it. Okay, there's no way to smell it. You have no idea it's coming. Okay, the only way to know it's there is to have a detector. Okay, so if that does happen, the symptoms are cold and flu symptoms at first. You feel pain in your joints, general malaise, tiredness, start to become exhausted, and you basically go to sleep. When you feel this way, your body's telling you something, whether it's carbon monoxide or you have the flu, your body's telling you something and you need to listen to it. The only treatment for carbon monoxide is to get the person out of that environment. You need to bring them out into fresh air. If you have oxygen, give them medical grade oxygen. The treatment at a hospital for it is they put you in a special room, and they decompress the room and push the carbon monoxide out of your cells. There is literally no treatment for that out in the field. The key is knowing it's there and getting the person out of the environment. That's all you can do out in the field by yourself.
اوكي. الى وقع الاختناق بسبب كربون اكسايد، يعني هذا يعني واحد هذا ما كيتشم، ما عندوش الريحه، يعني بالخلاف على الغاز، يعني غاز البوتان، يعني كربون مونوكسيد يعني ما عندوش الريحه، تقدر انت تكون كتشمو حتى تفقد الوعي والدم والامان امنته، ولكن الغاز عنده الريحه، يعني الانسان الا شمو راه غادي يدير اللازم باش يتفادى يعني سميتو. وبالنسبه للحاجه الوحيده اللي نقدر نديرو ان تخرج هذاك المريض بعدا من هذيك البلاصه، تديه لشي بلاصه فيها الاكسجين، تكون مساحه واسعه، يعني وتعيط الاسعاف. وإلا اقتضى الحال انه مثلا الانسان فقد الوعي، تعطيه السي بي ار، يعني التنفس الاصطناعي. هذا هو الحل. وشكرا لكم جميعا.
شكرا جزيلا لكم.
And we would like to thank Mr. George to having us today. And we miss today Mr. Dennis. هو المدير ديال اليونيفرسيتي، تعذر عليه يجي. ماشي مشكل. غادي نقدموا كلمة شكر للأستاذ جورج على هذا التواضع اللي تواضع معنا اليوم إن شاء الله، وغنقدموا ليه الشهادة، شهادة الشكر إن شاء الله. Sorry. Please accept from us this
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
كان نتمنى تصفقوا ليه يستاهل.
Thank you folks, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
أستاذ فريد.
مرحبا.
Thank you very much, Mr. George.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much مستر جورج والاستاذ فؤاد. تحياتنا لكم، شكرا على هذه المحاضره القيمه، شكرا لكم.
National Taekwondo ITF Committee Morocco testifying that instructor Mr. George Grassi have contributed to the success of the training for our honor and great experience to work with you. Please accept our appreciation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. تعذر بالنسبه للمدير انه اليوم يجي، ومع ذلك غادي نقدموا ليه لاتيستاسيون ديال المدير ولاتيستاسيون ديال اليونيفرسيتي حتى هي. This one is for university.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I'll make sure we put that in the hall. Thank you.
And this one for Mr.
For Dennis? Excellent. Thank you. I will I'll make sure he gets it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. مرحبا الأستاذ نادر، تفضل أنا كنسمعك. الإخوان كنتمنى منكم تقفلوا المايك ديالكم. الأستاذ نادر أيت مخروب، رئيس الجامعة، رئيس اللجنة الوطنية للتايكوندو إيتيف بالمغرب، لك الكلمة أستاذي.
Thank you very much for this seminar. I was very interested and fine, and thank you for behalf of the National Taekwondo Committee, ETF in Morocco. We have to cooperation with you and work together. Thank you so much, teacher.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is the president of the committee, national for Taekwondo ITF in Morocco.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, sir.
I am very happy to meet you, and I thank you to this seminar. Thank you, and I want to be cooperation in future. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome, sir. It was great meeting you, and I hope to see you guys in the future again. Maybe we could take this to the next level our next meeting.
كيشكركم جميعا، وان شاء الله كيقول نتمناو تكون عندنا شي شراكات اخرى عاوتاني، وكنشكركم جميع. كنا غادي نهضروا واحد شويه على تايكوندو اي تي اف يعني بالمغرب وما حققناه يعني منذ بدايته، ملي يعني دخل المغرب على يد الاستاذ نادر ايت مخروب الحكم والمدرب الدولي. يعني ما عندناش صراحه الوقت، الاستاذ عنده القسم كيتسناه باش يعطيه الدرس. المهم حنا غادي نديروا عاوتاني واحد اللقاء اخر ان شاء الله، اللي غادي نهضروا عليه على تايكواندو يعني اون جينيرال، لا على برا لا على الداخل ديال المغرب ان شاء الله. وكان البرنامج ان شاء الله مسطر، وان شاء الله نتمناو الخير للجميع. كنشكركم جميع. Thank you so much, Mr. George. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
شكرا
Take
جزيلا.
care, everybody.
تحياتي لكم.
شكرا.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام. شكرا أستاذ. نعم.
تحياتي، شكرا.